Hello there, welcome to Inquiring Minds. My name is Doug and I'm back with another Pen Resurrection Sunday video. Today's fountain pen back from the dead is this 1947 Parker 51 Vacumatic in Dove Gray. This one was looking pretty dingy and neglected and wasn't drawing up ink, but with a little bit of TLC, it's now looking amazing. This pen also surprised me because I thought it was a steel nib, but I was fooled. This is a 14 karat gold nib. Watch how I resurrected this late 1947 vacuum filler right now. Well, this is a 1947 Parker 51 Vacumatic that I recently acquired, and I wanted to show it first. Before I do anything to it, I've already heated the section to be able to get it off. So that now comes off, but it's encrusted with ink, and so we're going to clean that up. This section is kind of discolored here, so I'm going to polish that up to see whether I can fix that or whether I need to replace that hood. And I'm going to try to get that ink collector out of there, and I've already been able to budge that Vacumatic pump, but I haven't taken it out yet. So I thought I'd show what the pen looks like before I work on it. Cap has some what looks like brassing on that chrome clip. The jewel's in good shape, lots of scratches, a little bit of a dent, so we'll try to polish that up. The barrel has some abrasions all over it. The hood, again, as I say, is discolored, so we'll see what we can do about that. Another pen coming back to life. So I've been able to take the ink collector off and then got the nib out, and it is not a 1947 nib, so I think this is a replacement because it's not gold, and Parker didn't start putting steel nibs on 51s until 1950. This one says Parker made in the US, and it says RU on this side here, which means ruthenium. It's what the tipping material they put on these nibs, but this is probably gold plated and a replacement nib. And it looks like the sack might be original, but it was really kind of sad. So I'm going to replace that and clean out this barrel and polish up this nib as best I can. It doesn't matter that it's not gold if this nib writes well. So let's see how it behaves when I start polishing it, because if that's gold plate, that gold plate's going to come right off when I put it on my jeweler's cloth. Again, I don't really care that much because I can probably get a gold nib for this if I wanted to, but if the nib writes well, you don't see much of it anyway. So I'm going to polish the back side of it to see whether that is gold plated. I believe it is. If it is gold, it should have been marked 14K. A little bit of a rub there. Although it is maintaining its gold look, I'm going to put a magnet on it and see whether it sticks. And it doesn't. So this might indeed be gold. So we're going to pull the head off of a cotton swab. There we go. There, we'll put the end in that nib, give it a little bit more flexibility for polishing. And what do you know? Thought for sure they'd be marked 14K. If they were gold, but that is, in my opinion, gold. So there we go. Learn something new every day. Next up, we'll fix that Vacumatic pump, and we'll polish these barrels and hoods, and we'll get this ebonite feed out of here. There we go. There's the feeder tube, and we'll get all that cleaned up as well. A nice discovery. So here are the parts. I've polished up the barrel. I went through the various levels of micromesh from 1500 to 12,000, but when I started, if there were any little nicks or things that need a little bit of extra attention, I used this flexible 400 grit sandpaper. It's fabric back, so it's nice and flexible, just to get at certain little spots that needed attention, and then went back down through the chart color by color, and then I ended by vigorously polishing with my Meguiar's Mirror Glaze number 9 swirl remover 2. And when I was doing the polishing, I put the ink collector back in the barrel and put a pump back in the other end of the barrel so I could get the blind cap on, and I put the clutch ring on and the hood. So I polished the whole thing as a piece, so I didn't cause any rounding at all on any of the parts while I was sanding, and it came out rather nicely. There are still some discolorations of ink in the hood. There's a little spot right there where there's discoloration. That's very deep in the plastic. You can get replacements. I'm not sure that it would match the dove gray of the barrel that well, but I think a little bit of vintage vibe is good for a vintage pen. So we're going to put it back together again. I had a choice. When I was taking the sack out, I tried to get the pellet out of that pellet holder. It's a piece of ebonite, and I chipped it slightly, and I think, okay, well, it'll probably work, but I can get these replacements from Pen Tooling. So I'm going to get a few of these replacements from Pen Tooling, and I'll repair this particular pump later. But I've got a modern replacement for this Parker 51 from Pen Tooling, and so I'm going to use this one on this Parker 51 and resack it using that. The nib has surprised me. It is gold. It's not marked gold, but it's gold, and it polished up very nicely. And I polished up the ebonite feed as well, so it's nice and shining, so we can put that whole thing together again. And the siphon tube, ink stained of course, but it's clear of any debris, and then that will squeeze down inside the collector. So I'm going to line up the nib right to the end of the feed, just like that, and I'm going to put the large channel with the large channel on the ink collector, line them up as best I can, and push it in as far as it goes. That's what she said. There. The ink collector still ink stained, but I got most of the debris out of there, soaked it for a long time, and I got all the shellac, as much as I could, off of that collar. I'm not sure that I'll shellac that hood back down again. Some people recommend that we put rubber cement instead of shellac. As long as I'm still working on this nib, I will not be shellacking that hood down. There. Looked like it wasn't seated all the way. And we close that down, and we see that we're off by a good 50 degrees or so. So I'm going to mark with my thumb where the point of the hood is. Turn it around so that it's pointing roughly at my thumb. Pull it down again. You see I need to turn it another couple of degrees. A little bit more. And that looks perfect to me. And I've made a mark on my sack.
Daddy button.
It was painful with my X-Acto blade right at 28.5 millimeters. That's where I'm going to trim it off. And we're going to take our pellet pusher, put it up against the pellet, and we're going to get our pump and push that pellet into that ebonite pellet holder. There we go. Seems to be attached very nicely. And I use this Pendragon's pellet pusher, put it inside the sack. Now my friend Scott, who runs the Inky Nib and has made this Parker vac extractor tool and this pellet pusher, has emailed me and told me that he's making a new one of these so that it actually has the same kind of diameter as the sack. So I can just use his Inky Nib pellet pusher and use it for both pellet pushing and for holding inside the sack. I do this because it makes it a nice little mandrel kind of surface to be able to fold the sack back on itself. But the first thing we have to do before we fold our sack back on ourselves,
we are not aware of these impulses. Neither do we intend them to carry out our contraction of muscles.
sounds painful, but it's not. We just put a little talc powder on that sack just like that, so it slides nice and smooth on itself. So sometimes this works nicely, sometimes it doesn't, so I might cut away. The process is you peel it back onto itself, and that's why the little mandrel here helps, because you can push down on it. And it should slide right back onto that little shelf right there. And then you can withdraw this piece, and there you go. That's now working nicely. Now the next thing I like to do is to put some silicone oil. This is silicone oil from the hardware stores, actually for lubricating treadmills. I wouldn't know, I've never used a treadmill in my life, but it's a silicone oil, not a silicone grease, which is what I want it for. I just want it to lubricate just the end of that sack right there, and then I'll use it to lubricate these threads once I get this into the barrel. So I don't want that sack to twist. So once it's in there...
All right, help me in with this. Help me in with this. Help me in with this.
Think of your secretary.
That's a very good suggestion.
There we go. You can put it the rest of the way in. I just drop another little drop of silicone oil on those threads. Again, the idea is to lubricate, not so much to seal, because it doesn't really need sealing, just to make that slide nicely. And the silicone oil on the inside, while I'm tightening this down, allows the sack to rotate inside that barrel so it doesn't get kinked up. Now I put the collet from the Parker Vac extraction tool on there, and I can tighten that barrel down. There we go, nice and tight. Call it off, and that's done. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the nib off, but I'm going to just mark on the barrel where the center of that channel is, right there on both sides, where that channel opening is. Just a little scratch makes it easier to line up the next time. So I'm going to pull that out. I've got an endoscope camera that I'm going to inspect the inside of that barrel with. So this video shows how that sack extends up and down and becomes a pump, a pneumatic pump that pumps ink up into the barrel. And it shows that it's not twisted and it's working nicely. Now that's working well, I can put the nib and feed back in. I'm going to look for that little mark that I made on the barrel and line that up. Make sure the nib's aligned. The hood back on, check the alignment. Yep, looks good. I got the cap cleaning right now, so we'll look at the cap next. So I took the cap apart. You use a little bit of rubber matting, turn this little cap jewel out of the top, and there's the brass nut inside, and then you can use a slot screwdriver on that to unscrew that brass nut bolt, and then the cap liner comes free inside there. There is this clutch in here, and you can remove that to clean it further, but it's in pretty good shape, and I don't like to pull the clutch on these because it curls that chrome edge. The slip cap never seems to work properly again. But I polished up the barrel as best it could. There's still a little bit of an indentation, abrasion right there where the clip sits, of course. So we're going to put this back together again, and trusty HB pencil pushes up against that cap liner, and then there's a little lip that situates the edge of the clip lip, just like that. Put the cap screw back in, and this is brass against plastic, so you have to be careful that you don't cross thread it. We'll get it started here. There we go. And you push up on the pencil and down on the screw, and there. We screw the jewel back on, put down a little bit of rubber matting, and give it a twist to make sure it's tight. And there we go. The cap looks pretty good. There's a little bit of corrosion and a few dings and things there. And of course there's that abrasion under the clip, but you can't really see that. And there's one small dent right there that's very minor. Well, it looks very good. And the slip cap still works. There, now all we have to do is ink it up and try out that nib. So this is a 1947 Parker 51 Vacumatic. And boy, this looks like a medium to me. Wow. This is gushy and smooth. Wow. And here is the pen fully restored. This is a 4th quarter 1947 Vacumatic Parker 51, so it does have the relatively more modern non-blue diamond clip. The clip is similar to the early Parker Vacumatic clip, but is longer. Here's a 1st generation Parker Vacumatic, so you can see the similarity. This newer clip is called transitional, as it was in reaction to the Supreme Court ruling on lifetime warranties in 1947. So this configuration of the newer Aero clip and being a Vacumatic is relatively rare, in that the Vacumatic was discontinued at the end of 1948. Of course, the Vacumatic was replaced by Parker's new filling system called the Aerometric. Personally, I don't see what the value in the upgrade is at all. I prefer the Parker Vacumatic and think it's one of the best filling systems ever made. Here is a 1954 Parker 51 Aerometric. The Aerometric is basically a sack that has a bar across the side, which you squeeze while the nib is in the ink, and it draws up ink. Yes, the sack Parker used was revolutionary for the time, in that it is made of what they called plyglass, a transparent rough plastic that lasts what seems like forever. But the edges of this bar are sharp. It takes multiple pumps against that sharp metal to fill the much lower capacity sack. And the Vacumatic, for me, is much easier to operate, and the pen accommodates a huge amount of ink in the barrel. They were more expensive to manufacture, repair, and the pneumatic sack requires replacing long before the end of the life of the pen. But the concept of the Vacumatic with modern materials is actually a terrific system. Here is the Wingsung 601, which has a modern version of the Parker Vacumatic, and it should require no future replacement with its piston configuration. I've reviewed the Parker 51 Vacumatic on several occasions, and I'll just give a brief overview of this pen. As I said, it's a transitional model between the Parker 51 Vacumatic with the blue diamond Art Deco style clip and the P51 Aerometric. So in this configuration, they were only made between late 1947, like this one in the last quarter of 47, and when the Aerometric was introduced in late 1948. This one has a Lustraloy chrome cap with a new old style clip and is in the color Dove Gray. The nib is 14 karat gold, even though it isn't marked as gold, which tells me it's probably a replacement. The latex diaphragm wasn't totally desiccated like I'd expect most 76-year-old latex sacks to be, so I suspect it has been replaced as well. Not recently though, as it was pretty flimsy. The stains still remaining on the hood tell me that the pen sat with ink in the cap for quite a long time, and the ink has permanently invaded that plastic. I've replaced the Vacumatic pump with a modern vac pump from pentooling.com. Now let's look at some size comparisons. And here is the 1947 Parker 51 Vacumatic in Dove Gray with a 1960 Parker 61 in a slightly different color gray, a 1967 Parker 45 Flighter, 1960s or 70s, I'm not sure, Parker 17 made in France, and a 1960s Parker 21 with a gold cap and green body. Now let's look at them posted. And here they are posted. This collection really shows the evolution of Parker from the 51 through to the 61 in the 1960s. Much longer section here, and it posts even deeper, so even though the section's longer, the pen is a little bit shorter, and it has that little arrow on the top of the hood to indicate where the nib is, which is very helpful. And then there's the Parker 45 that came out in the 1960s, and some really interesting variations on the Parker 51, the Parker 17, and the Parker 21. Now let's look at them unposted. And here they are unposted. They're all relatively the same length, unposted, but have different treatments in the end cap. The Parker 21 is basically the budget version of the Parker 51. Now let's look at some measurements, and I'll be back with a writing sample. And we're back with the writing portion of the review. This is Clairefontaine 90 GSM paper, and this is a 1947 Parker 51 Vacumatic. And it has a 14 karat gold medium nib. Let's check the wetness. Well, this nib is crazy wet. This is the juiciest Parker 51 nib I've ever experienced, and it is silky smooth. And it's a marvelous writer. And the ink today is, of course, Waterman's Serenity Blue. I always use Waterman's Serenity Blue in vintage pens with latex sacks, as it's one of the safest inks to use. Other Waterman's colors can be used as well. Waterman's Black and Waterman's Mysterious Blue are also safe inks to use. And this nib makes a 0.6 millimeter line, which is a Western medium or a Japanese medium to broad on my Richard Binder line width chart, which you can find linked in the description. And for our quote: and for some reverse writing, a lot more feedback, a lot thinner and a lot drier, but it actually writes. And for some quick writing, no issues whatsoever. This is a very nicely wet pen. So what are my thoughts on this resurrection? I've grown fond of vintage Parker 51s, but usually they come with fine nibs that make rather boring dry lines. So when an exception comes along, the pen is really exciting. I wasn't expecting much from this pen and held off restoring it for several months. But when I put this pen to paper, I was instantly thrilled with it, as it makes a juicy, thick line and is super smooth. It isn't often you get a wow moment when putting a Parker 51 nib to the page. I'm very pleased with how the cap, barrel, and section all polished up very nicely. The hood still has some discoloration and staining on it, and I had considered looking for a replacement hood for it. But finding a replacement hood in Dove Gray isn't easy, and they aren't cheap, running around the same price as I paid for this entire pen. And I'm not sure I want a vintage pen to look like it's NOS or new old stock. I like when they are polished up and gleaming and write like they are brand new, but show signs of their age and some indications of previous use. Signs of age and used marks on vintage items is called patina, or patina, and adds character, in my opinion. You tell me what you think. Do you want a vintage pen restored to showroom condition, or do you like them to show their age? And there you have it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell to get instant notifications whenever a new video is posted. You can also join as a member of my channel for only 99 cents a month, and I guarantee I'll answer your comments in the comment section, and you'll get cool emojis, badges, and sneak peek unboxing videos as well. And that just leaves it for me to say thank you for watching, and that's all she wrote.
this.